So this is the new $8,200 Hasselblad 907 X100C. It has the same 100 megapixel sensor that was in the X2D 100C of 2022, and the same form factor as the 907 X50C of 2020, which of course has a very similar design to Hasselblad's very first camera that launched in 1948. But it's worth talking about in 2024 because once you start using this camera, you are transported somewhere else. Somewhere slower, somewhere dreamier. I mean, it's just somewhere different. Here's 4 reasons why using this camera is special. First, waist level shooting. You cannot hold this camera like any other digital camera. The 907 X100C forces you to shoot at waist level. It sits in your hands with both palms naturally cradling the bottom of it. This takes a lot of getting used to, and it forces a different perspective. This form factor also physically connects you to the camera more. Instead of pushing the shutter down, you're pushing it towards you. And instead of holding the camera out, you're holding it close. It begins to feel a lot like a baby or something to take care of, something to nurture. Number 2, you are forced to use a slower pace. I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it a million times more, nothing happens quickly with a Hasselblad. Now, there are some benefits to that, and there are also some drawbacks. What slows the 907 X100C down in a bad way is mostly the lack of internal stabilization. With no stabilization, I boosted my ISO, I opened my aperture, and I underexposed before I let my shutter speed go below 1/125th of a second, or where I knew I'd be able to capture a crisp shot without putting the camera on a tripod. There's also no built-in EVF to create a second point of contact from the camera to your body in order to help steady the camera. So you are forced to stop moving, plant your feet firmly, and lock those elbows in if you don't want to put the camera down on something. The images I captured with this camera are mostly crisp because I did all of this. But another time the lack of stabilization becomes a problem is when you're framing. Attempting to align the edges of a photo with railings or any hard line can be difficult when the frame is slightly moving any which way. In short, if you want to get great photos with this camera, you have to move at its pace, which means that some styles of photography, such as sports or some street, are going to be far more difficult with this system. That's a lot of drawbacks for a modern camera system, but there's also the benefit of just being forced to be still, which I think is a good reminder for all of us. 3, the sounds it makes. That is the sweet, sweet sounds of a mushy shutter button and a big ol' leaf shutter. When you take a photo with this camera, you feel the photo being captured. And in a world that is increasingly virtual, physical movements and audible signals just hit differently. Hasselblad is the only camera manufacturer that is still making mirrorless cameras with interchangeable lenses that have leaf shutters, which means that instead of the shutter being in the body of the camera, it's housed in the lens. In the age of global shutters, many of the benefits of a leaf shutter, such as faster flash sync speeds, don't so much matter. But the sound and the feel of a leaf shutter in a lens this big, oh my god. I mean, it's hard to describe how great that feels in your hands. Lastly, number 4, you get dreamy color science and incredible depth. The 907 X100C has an 100 megapixel medium format sensor. Match that with Hasselblad's color science and it makes for images that are utterly sharp and true to life. Photos from this camera feel like memories frozen in time, pulled right out of my eyeballs, as opposed to images that are over-sharpened or oversaturated or need a great deal of editing. The large sensor and the fast lenses also create an incredible amount of depth with an elegant fall-off. I've been saying all of the same things about this color science for years, and I mean, it just remains true in this system. Images are, oh my god, they're like buttery, they're beautiful, you just want to keep taking them, even though you really don't have anywhere to put them or print them, but just the joy of seeing them, it just feels good. So that's the 907 X100C. The only large difference between this camera and the previous 907 X50C is 50 more megapixels, a built-in 1 terabyte of storage, and phase detection autofocus. But I still wanted to make a video about this camera because I think it's important that this exists. The resurgence of film photography has shown me that photographers want to feel something different when using systems, or they want to have different results. And that's getting harder and harder in a market where all of the cameras look and feel and sound the same. So the fact that Hasselblad is continuing to put out cameras as different as this, it's so good, it's so important, and it feels so good to use. Unfortunately, it's so expensive. I mean, $8,200 for the body alone will keep so many folks from being able to use this. If you have the money and you can find a rental somewhere, I cannot recommend getting a weekend with this camera enough. I mean, it'll just make you see the world differently, and I think that's important. That's the 907X100C. Thank you for looking at all of my vacation photos with me. I'm Becca. I hope that we continue to see companies investing time and money into cameras that are different, and they continue to take risks, like maybe putting out new 35mm cameras. I think it's important that this market stays different and unique and fun.